Welcome back, dear friends, at Lit ECT YouTube channel. And in our series, Great Writers of World Literature, we will today take a very popular and critically acclaimed work by Canadian novelist Margaret Atwood, alias Grace. Dear friends, this is one of her most critically acclaimed work, and it is a story of a slave girl, her long journey. It includes so many adventures and misadventures, and shows a real, we can say, solid character. And the novel is also famous for treatment, a very, we can say, very sensitive treatment of feminist issues. It includes two or three main characters. It is actually journey of Grace from Ireland, then she goes to Canada, she starts working at house, makes friend, then there is a shock, then she moves to another house, once again she meets some new people, and then she is accused of murdering a particular woman, and because of this she ends up in a mental asylum, then in Kingston Penitentiary, and finally in the end she is there in Ithaca, married to a boy who loved her in the initial part of the novel. So not only the plot is quite complicated, involve lot of incidents, but the development of character of Grace, that is the name of the protagonist, is also very beautifully done. Okay, so basic things first, that it is the genre, it is known as historical fiction, which Margaret Atwood herself calls her novels, and sometimes she calls them speculative fiction, but it is not one among speculative fiction. It was first published in 1996, and the setting of the majority of novel is Richmond Hill, Toronto, though as we have seen in the chart there is some other locations also. Actually, Margaret Atwood based the plot on an actual incident which involved Grace Marks, a servant accused of murdering her employer and his mistress. It was, as you can see this document, it was a real incident, and in fact, there was another writer before Margaret Atwood who has covered this particular incident, and Atwood also gave credit to her, that is Susanna. Grace is an Irish immigrant. Now, she came to Canada at the age, very tender age of 12, along with her parents. But during this hard voyage, her mother dies, and Grace is never able to recover from this loss, from this shock. And another very torturous thing for her, that though she is the eldest child, her father, who is an alcoholic and abusive, he makes life of Grace and other children a hell, and Grace soon has to leave home in Canada to find work as a servant. She first finds work at Mrs. Alderman Parkinson, and soon she gets a close friend in form of Mary Whitney. She is another servant woman working there. During her stay, she also meets a traveling salesman, Jeremiah. He is a nomadic who tries to convince Grace to run away with him. Actually, he also gives clue about the destiny Grace has to share. And another interesting incident which I must add here, that there is a fun game which both Mary and Grace plays, that they throw at their back the peel of an apple to find out the alphabet of the name of their future husband, and in Grace's turn it comes out letter J. Now this is very significant because she will come across at least three persons having J as the initial name, Jeremiah being the one. Now, Mary soon dies due to some complications during an abortion. She was actually carrying the child of George, the son of Mrs. Alderman. Now, it is quite obvious that Mrs. Alderman doesn't want to bring this scandal on her house, and so the whole incident is hushed up, and it is only left only for Grace, who is very disturbed because she was very much close to Mary. She performs Mary's last rites and not being able to stay here anymore because she is also now afraid of this particular person, George, who is always looking at her with lecherous eyes. She now shifts to the house of Thomas Kinnear in Richmond Hill. Dear friends, it was Nancy Montgomery, the housekeeper at Richmond House, who actually brought Grace to this house, and initially she is very sweet towards Grace. But Grace soon learns that Thomas Kinnear lives alone and Nancy is acting as his mistress. There is very few person in the house. Nancy soon becomes jealous of Grace because she thinks that she is getting plump and fattier, and Thomas is interested in the new girl, so she is afraid, she is feeling insecure that her place might be taken by this new young girl, Grace. There is another hired hand, James McDonald, who is also an Irish person and a hardcore misogynist. He hates women, and he actually hates this fact that he has to work under Nancy, which he can't tolerate. Grace now has tough time with Nancy, who starts to harass and insult her, treating her with growing contempt, making her life difficult there. Grace, however, finds a friend in Jamie Walsh, a neighborhood boy who plays flute, who run errands whenever Grace or Nancy call for him, and even on her birthday, she spends time with Jamie. Once again, it becomes the talk among all the people. Now, the twist in Grace's life comes in 1843 when Thomas Kinnear and Nancy, they both are murdered. It is supposed that while Kinnear was away for a day or two, Nancy threatened to sack both Grace and James. Obviously, James hated Nancy and Nancy hated Grace, and so enraged, they first murdered Nancy, throwing her body in the cellar, and then later James shoot Kinnear. Once again, his body is also thrown down the cellar. Now, a trial sets up, and it is because of the testimony of Jamie Walsh. He has seen that Grace was wearing stockings of Mary, and she was looking quite bright. That Grace and James, they are both found guilty. James McDermott is hanged, and Grace is given the life sentence. Now, in his confession, James put the blame on Grace for the act. It is basically, dear friends, all these major events, they happen in flashback, and the story actually begins when Grace is sent to the prison. It is now 1859. Grace is in the prison for more than a decade. In between, she has also served a little time at mental asylum where she was much tortured. The basic twist is that Grace claims to have no memory of the day of the incident. She is completely blank about this thing. During her imprisonment, she also works at governor's house, helping his wife to learn sewing, especially quilt making. Now, Reverend Veringer, he is a very sympathetic person especially towards the case of Grace, and he leads a committee that seeks to obtain pardon for Grace. Finally, they get the help of Dr. Simon Jordan. He is an Harvard-educated American psychiatrist who has an ambition to open an asylum of his own. Jordan is very much interested in Grace's case, and with hope to revive her memories about the fateful day, he begins to interview Grace on regular basis. However, Jordan, he is also having an illicit affair with his landlady, Mrs. Rachel Humphrey. Her husband has abandoned her, and Rachel is rather sexually aggressive, and he leaves no chance to seduce Jordan. Dr. Jordan, even after hearing the whole story, when Grace tells that she doesn't remember what exactly happened on that day, reach a conclusion. He's not able to reach a conclusion regarding her involvement in the murders. When thus Jordan is not able to get the vital information, he finally decides to take help of Dr. Jaram Dupont, a friend of Veringer, and who has just arrived there and calls himself a hypnotizer. Grace is shocked when she first meets this Jaram Dupont, because actually it is Jeremiah. He has promised her that he would come, and there is a silent understanding between them. In fact, this is the third visit Jaram is paying him. He has also paid her a visit when she was at Thomas Kinnear house, and even then he has asked her to come with him. During the hypnosis, it is revealed that Grace has been intermittently possessed by the spirit of Mary Whitney, and during the hypnosis, this whole thing becomes clear that why Grace is not being able to remember that particular chain of events. The voice of Mary tells the audience that it was she who basically egged on James to kill both these persons, Thomas Kinnear and Nancy. Grace now speaks in Mary's voice and confesses that it was she who possessed Grace and killed Nancy, and that is why Grace doesn't remember anything about the incident. Now, Dr. Jordan knows that he cannot write a report that supports hypnotism, because he would be considered a quack. And even more, he thinks that Grace is playing a trick. It is basically not the real truth. But Veringer wouldn't allow him to go before writing the report, and there is also news spreading about his illicit relationship with his landlady. So, unable to reach the conclusion, he eludes everyone, catches a train back to the States. During the Civil War, he enlists as a military surgeon. He is injured in the head, loses his memory. Jordan's mother admits that her son mistakenly refers to his betrothed as Grace. So we can understand that his mind is totally possessed by these interviews with Grace. Grace finally gets pardoned after 28 years of imprisonment. She is sent to Ithaca, New York, where she is surprised to find Jamie, and at the end of the novel, she finds she is pregnant. She feels that it can be a tumor like the one that caused the death of her mother. In the concluding part of the novel, Grace describes her afternoons while she is knitting a quilt, and for the first time she is knitting for herself. She has embroidered many scenes on the quilt. There are snakes, and then she calls it Tree of Paradise. Though it has many traditional things, but there is something different. She uses cloth material that's there are three triangles. You can see 1, 2, and these three triangles, and these are made from, first is from Mary's petticoat, which she gave her when Grace first time menstruated, then her own prison night dress, and the dress which Nancy wore when Grace first came to Mr. Kinnear's. The final line of the novel is, "And so we all be together." There are also 3 epigraphs in the beginning of the novel. The first epigraph of the novel is from William Morris' poems, The Defense of Guinevere. Whatever may have happened through these years, God knows I speak truth, saying that you lie. Second epigraph is from a letter written by Emily Dickinson, I have no tribunal. Third epigraph of the novel is from a non-fiction work called The Soul of the White Ant by naturalist Eugene Marai. It reads, I cannot tell you what the light is, but I can tell you what it is not. What is the motive of the light? What is light? Dear friends, all these epigraphs have some or other function related with the story, and it is a deeply complicated story which is typical part of fiction of Margaret Atwood. I hope you enjoyed this particular video. You were able to get the main points and summary of the novel. We will soon meet with some another important works by Margaret Atwood. Thank you, dear friends.